presentation of this conference. I think there is a reason that why we have kept it here, because the next presentation and the last presentation is going to talk about generally the importance of the epistemology and the importance of reinterpretation. And this is being given by Professor Dr. Ahmet Kuru. And although he has been, recently his book has been widely acclaimed, but I like to introduce him as a professor of political science at San Diego State University. And his recent book in particular, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, a global and historical comparison, has won several awards and has been translated into several languages. His ideas are, I think, being followed. And we are looking forward to your presentation, Dr. Ahmed. Floor is yours. You have 20 minutes.
Thank you, Ali. Thanks for organizing this conference. I'm grateful to you and all other ILN team members. I wake up 5 a.m. today to participate in the conference. It's early in San Diego now. So I would like to share my screen for a presentation. Can I do that?
Yes, please.
Okay. So share screen. As you see here, the title is Literalism and Hierarchy in Islamic Epistemology. And the question, how can we make it more empirical and participatory? It's based on my book, as Ali referred to, Islam, Authoritarianism and Underdevelopment, a Global and Historical Comparison, examines the root of and hierarchical power relations and also epistemological domination that I call ulama-state alliance, which did not exist before 11th century in this particular form, then gradually emerge afterwards, and then even today has a certain impact. And I think it fits to the conference title, Inclusion, Pluralism and Prosperity, because really, in order to reach freedom and prosperity, we need inclusionary and pluralistic institutions. And it starts with ideas and epistemology to be more inclusive and pluralistic. So I would like to refer to Moroccan philosopher and thinker, Jabiri. And I quoted him twice in my book because of the importance of his view of Islamic history and presence in terms of epistemology. Basically, epistemology means the science of knowledge or the source of knowledge in general. And Jabiri says, if it were admissible to name Islamic culture according to one characteristic, then we can call it the culture of fiqh, jurisprudence. He is referring to basically Imam Shafi's usul fiqh. In the same sense that applies to Greek culture when we call it culture of philosophy, and contemporary European culture as culture of science and technology. Elsewhere, Jabiri became more specific, saying that the rules of jurisprudence established by Imam Shafi are no less important in forming Arab Islamic reason, and I would add that Turkish the same today, than the rules of methodology posited by Descartes about the formation of French reason, and elsewhere he referred to John Locke and British understanding of empiricism. So what does he mean, and why do I agree with him? It's not simply an issue of making fiqh or Islamic law is the basis of the legal system. Because in my book, I have this table that categorizes 49 Muslim majority countries. And you see in this summary explanation, 22 of them have secular laws and secular constitutions. 8 of them have mixed legal systems. And only 19 have Sharia law, Islamic law in the constitution. But what Jabiri is arguing is not simply the constitutional system, legal framework, we are talking about the importance of the idea of usul al-fiqh in Muslims' understanding of word, reference to making basis of knowledge and wisdom. And that's what we go beyond law and reach the concept of epistemology. So what is it? Basically, in a very nutshell, at the very beginning, for about 400 years, Muslims had multiple methods, multiple jurisprudential systems, and multiple epistemologies. And some summarizes in two schools in terms of fiqh. Ahl Ray of Abu Hanifa, the founding of Hanafi school, who emphasizes that the ray or opinion of a wise person matters. It's the individual decision of a knowledgeable person. Whereas Imam Shafi'i systematized what was also promoted by Ahmet ibn Hanbal. That's called Ahl Hadith. They are more literalist. They are much more based on text and basically referring to Hadith, and very crucial. And today, one branch became Salafi Wahhabi in Saudi Arabia and elsewhere, following Ibn Hanbal's literalism. But the overall system of Imam Shafi became so dominant that even in Turkey today, even Hanafis, they really became Shafi in terms of epistemology and fiqh. But they don't know the difference, how Abu Hanifa was in fact different, had an Ahl Ray methodology. This epistemological crisis was very visible in the life of Imam Ghazali, although Ghazali himself was a follower of Imam Shafi in terms of usul al-fiqh. In his autobiography, Al-Munqidh min al-Dalal, so the deliverance from the error, Ghazali discussed how he had a crisis personally in terms of following multiple epistemologies, that he has a strong critique of Shia understanding of imamate and following the leader as a source of knowledge. He has a critique of empirical knowledge based on five senses. But he also criticized fiqh. Even in Ihya Ulumuddin, he's very critical of fiqh as too much dry and redundant. That's why he refers to mysticism and brings Sufism at the center of Sunni, even in general Islamic thought. And he accepts Aristotelian logic. That's why today in many madrasas, Izagogi has been taught, and Ibn Taymiyyah critical of Ghazali for accepting Aristotelian logic. And in fact, it was Muslims, especially Ibn Rushd, who taught Western Europeans Aristotelian science and logic and epistemology. But after the 16th and 17th centuries, Europeans went beyond Aristotle. The French case, in Netherlands and French, they developed Cartesian logic by Descartes, Spinoza, more rationalist epistemology. Whereas in United Kingdom, with Scottish and English thinkers like Bacon, Locke, they emphasize a Lockean logic. There is a huge debate how Locke and others have been inspired by Ibn Tufayl, and a Muslim Andalusian thinker, and his novel, Hay bin Yakzan, where Tufayl also provide the idea of tabula rasa and white page, where empiricism can start with. But despite all the diversity and richness of Muslim intellectual history, today, among the Islamic circles, there is the idea that Islamic law determine and give guidance to everything. In Turkish, we say from toilet manners to government, based on very literalist notion of the Quran Hadith, and also the authority of ulama as ijma, consensus. And reasoning is only limited to qiyas, making analogical reasoning. So many scholars are aware of the problem here. For example, Shatibi said that with this methodology, we cannot solve the problem of 16th century, 15th, 16th centuries when he lived. And in my book, I said Shatibi had been very surprised. He would have seen today that after 500 years after him, we are still dealing with this epistemology, very literalist, taking ulama very hierarchical. So there are problems. For example, in Turkey, 5 years ago, I had a debate with a scholar arguing that we cannot criticize Muawiyah because there is an hadith about Sahaba, Ashab, and they are like the stars that everybody should follow. And then you have to take Quran and hadith as a source of history. And I say, no, history is a discipline. We analyze the data. If we end up with Muawiyah or another Sahaba is a part of a persecution, existing of a hadith doesn't justify what historically happened. We look at history as history. And medical sciences, so fiqh and Catholic clergy, so Muslim clergy, Catholic clergy were not very different when it comes to their barrier of medical sciences over corpse, cadaver. But eventually today, no ulama claim that medical experiment should not be done. Then why did we make this delay for centuries? About why did you put this restraint and restriction for over centuries? Same thing with slavery. This epistemology really is not very adapting and encouraging new changes. It's very conservative. After slavery abolition in Europe and everything, Muslim ulama today accept that, but we lost many centuries. Women's suffrage. So in Gulf, only Kuwait, it was accepted, but eventually it will be accepted everywhere. No Muslim country will be able to resist the idea of giving women the right to vote. So why are ulama in the Gulf, for example, is resisting now? It's just wasting time. And there is a huge debate, maybe I can open in the Q&A, but in the democratic lawmaking, we have lawmaking more participatory, more egalitarian. And it's good to have women voices, non-ulama people's voices in the lawmaking and overall epistemology, rather than just relying on a group of men we call ulama to make the law. So I am optimistic about the future. There will be multiple epistemologies in the future. Reform attempts already exist. As I said, Ghazali himself tried to bring a Sufi mystical opening. Unfortunately, Sufism ended up with very hierarchical. There are many reasons we can discuss. Muhyiddin Arabi's idea of Kutub, and then the Gauss, then 7, then the 40, etc. Very hierarchical spiritual authority that exists today is very problematic. Even then Imam Shatibi, again referring to Ghazali, developed the idea of Maqasid Sharia, 5 main principles of Islamic law, saying that rather than particular rules, let's look at the divine goals, the main purposes of law. That's a way of trying to reform. Or the emphasis on maslaha, the welfare of community in Maliki fiqh and others. That's another way of making more adapting to conditions other than being literalistic. So there is in Turkey and elsewhere the debate that either Islamic law will be focusing on worshipping rituals, namaz, salat, saum, not social economic issues, that's secularization. Or if you really believe that Islamic law will have things to say from toilet manner to governance, then really the method should be reformed. So the inclusion of empirical knowledge and rational thinking, not reasoning per se, but rationalism as a source of producing knowledge, really necessary somehow. That's the way to include social sciences, empirical sciences into production of law and knowledge in Islamic worldview. So what makes me optimistic? 2 things. Let me conclude by that. As I'm explaining in my new book, from 8th to mid-11th century, the Muslim religious understanding was much more decentralized, diverse. there was no hegemony of ulama state. Most ulama like Abu Hanifa, Imam Shafi himself, Ahmet bin Hanbal, Imam Malik put a distance between themselves and political authorities, which creates certain level of diversity and dynamism. And then when we look at the Quran and the Hadith, there is also a possibility of questioning today's understanding of ijma, because when you ijma is the core of this usul fiqh, the ulama decide, arguing a consensus. But who justify them to do so? They say there is an hadith saying that my community never agree upon error. But the Prophet ﷺ is not saying that my ulama never agree upon error. He says my community. Similarly, there is nothing in the Quran or hadith about ulama state alliance. That's why Ibn Taymiyyah and others just interpret the phrase in the Quran, ulul amri minkum. So obey those who have authority. But who has the authority? Some says those who have wisdom, expertise, knowledge. Some say ulama, some say state authority. Ibn Taymiyyah say ulama and state. What I call ulama state alliance, according to Ibn Taymiyyah, to obey it as a Quranic order, but it's just an interpretation. The words refer neither ulama nor state. Similarly, since there is no hadith to justify, they fabricate it. And you can see this hadith in Ihya Ulumuddin, but Ghazali doesn't say it's a hadith, it's a saying, it says, which is true. It's a Sasani saying, it's a Persian government maxim. Religion and state are twins. Religion is the foundation, state is the guardian. That without foundation collapse, that without the guardian perishes. This Sasani maxim has been propagated as if it's a hadith, which is a fabrication. Because again, there is nothing in the Quran or hadith justify this hegemonic authority of ulama state. So let me conclude by saying that today, we really have an epistemological crisis. And many scholars, Ghazali, Shatibi, for centuries emphasize that. I think it's time for Muslim intellectual today to think about how to make Islamic lawmaking and epistemology more participatory by bringing expertise of different people, by bringing women and non-ulama men into the discussion, and how to make it less hierarchical by criticizing the hierarchy of Sufi sheikhs in tariqas and the hierarchical authority of ulama on this issue. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer if there's any question.
Thank you so much, Ahmed, for very important presentation. And I'm glad that we are ending our conference at your presentation, because when we started the conference, we talked about the Muslim world in general, and Muslim majority countries, OIC member countries, and their relationship with the political freedom and economic freedom. And I'm happy that you are in your presentation pointing out a way forward, particularly in dealing with the understanding of Islam.